Hi, we're just going to cover assessments 3A and 3B for this unit called CHCECE044. It's about facilitate compliance in an educational care service. So as you can see here, I'm in the assessments tab, and you can see there are 4 assessments. So we're going to be looking specifically at assessment 3, part A and B. So scroll down, you can see part A is here. So these are just the instructions, and it's a PDF document. So reading the task description, you're required to facilitate a self-assessment. So this is not a self-assessment of you personally, this is a self-assessment of the service that you work in. And you're going to be using 2 quality areas to base your self-assessment on, and that's quality area 3, the physical environment, and quality area 5. So you need to be looking at the national quality standards, and I'll show you in a minute. You're using the self-assessment tool from a CHCCECE044, which is also in Moodle, and I'll show you where. And then for B, then you're going on to the quality improvement plan, and you're still using just quality area 3 and 5, even though the document will have quality areas 1 through to 7. You're going to leave those blank, and you're only going to focus on quality areas 3 and 5. So I just retrieved that PDF document from there to see the instructions, but if you read these, you can see here you can download the self-assessment tool here. And when completed, you're going to be submitting this self-assessment tool. Okay, here's what it looks like. So you can read through all of this stuff here, because many services would use this tool if the regulatory authority, a CHCCECE044, has contacted them and said a person is going to come out and visit your service and assess you against the 7 quality areas. So you might do a self-assessment to look at what the assessor would look at. So in this case, you're going to put your lens on and pretend you are the person from a department coming in to check how your service is going against quality area 3, and you can see that's on page 40, and quality area 5 is on page 57. So you can skip through all of this stuff. So here we are at page 40, which is where you're going to be starting, because this is quality area 3, which is about the physical environment. So when you're looking at quality area 3, you're looking at how your service keeps children safe, what kind of experiences your service used to promote children's learning and development, how the spaces are organised to reduce risk of injury. So when you are looking at these and you need that kind of interpretation of what this means, these are the national quality standards. So if you need to know where those national quality standards come from, we're at CHCCECE044, the main website, and if you click here, there's a drop-down menu, and the national quality standard sits under the national quality framework. So if you want to look a bit closer at quality area 3, here it is. So you've got your standards here and your elements. So if you go back to your document, you'll see you've got your standard design, and that's a descriptor, and then you've got your elements, 3.11, so on. So this is what you're assessing. So here's the legislative requirements. So the table below has sections of the law and regulations. So these underpin quality area 3. So with that being in mind, so you got R stands for regulation, and that is the regulation number. So you can see most of these are an R. There's no L there for law. So what you're going to do for more information is to look at that actual regulation. So to do that, you would come here. The National Quality Standard sits under the NQF, and also the National Law and Regulations. So let's have a look at those. We want to skip that. We're going straight to the regulations. Now what's happened here is when you click on this, it will open up a very large PDF document. And what you want to be looking for in this case, so you can see how that turns into a hand when I move over, you can click straight into it. So if we go back to the document, you're looking for, maybe you want to see about bassinets. So that's 84D. So let's have a look. Looking for 84D. So you can see here, bassinets are prohibited, and you can actually see more about what that means. So the approved provider must ensure that a bassinet is not on the premises at any time. So you would come back here and you would go, well, are we compliant? Have we got a bassinet? And if you have got one, well, you're non-compliant. So You can press an X there, or I'm trying to push the button and nothing goes in there. Usually it's a clickable form, but in this case you can just put an X or a tick or something like that. And if you haven't got any bassinets, obviously you're going to be compliant, so you'd be putting a plus there. So this column here is only to be filled out if anything along here is clicked as non-compliant. So let's have a look at the laundry facilities, the laundry and hygiene. So that's regulation 106. So I go back to that website where I've downloaded that PDF document, and I want to go back up to the table of contents, which is right up the top, and I'm looking for 106. Here it is, laundry and hygiene facilities. So an approved provider must ensure that they have laundry facilities or access to laundry facilities or other arrangements. So in other words, does your centre hire a laundromat or someone comes to pick up the laundry? And then it's got the approved provider ensures that the laundry facilities are located and maintained in a way that doesn't pose a risk to children. So in other words, is the doors accessed by children. So they're what you're looking for to know whether to tick this box compliant or non-compliant. So you go through those, and there's a lot, but once you get you back and forth going and just have a quick look through, obviously you're not going to have a swimming pool or things like that, so they're definitely going to be compliant, or NA you can put in there. So if you do find something compliant, you want to put a detailed example in there of the how that non-compliance could be rectified. So for example, let's say there's a non-compliance around that laundry where, it is accessible by children, so therefore it's non-compliant. Rectification could be to move the door handles or to put a lock on the door or something like that. So it could be a conversation you have with your room leader or the centre director around how that, how things like that would be rectified to make sure they're compliant with the national regulations and laws. Then you're moving on to the next section, and you're still on quality area 3 here, but you're going through each of them one by one, and you're going to identify evidence that shows that, you are meeting this area. So how are you meeting 3.1.1, that element, which is outdoor spaces and buildings and fixtures are suitable for the purpose, including supporting the access for every child. So in other words, have you got in your babies, like if you're in a long daycare and you've got a baby room and the indoor and outdoor spaces has got lots of climbing things, is that fit for purpose? So you might want to identify that in the baby's room you've got equipment that suits their developing needs and the fact that they're crawling and not walking, so there's lots of tunnels and things like that. So you want to put things like that, and you're writing met or not met. And then upkeep. Are the premises, furniture and equipment safe, clean and well maintained? So you could say, yes, we meet that because we have a cleaning roster and all the toys get wiped down at the end of the day, things like that. Inclusive environment. So are the spaces organised to support every child's participation? So a big thing that used to occur as the day comes to an end is a lot of the toys get covered over. So that sort of fits in there. Is that an inclusive environment when you're closing toys off and closing sections off and getting the vacuum out? It's sort of not really inclusive. But you might think of another example. So it's about having a chat to the people in your room and going, well, are our spaces organised? Do we support participation? And do we engage children in quality experiences? And have we got a mixture of those natural and built environments? So if you've got a lot of plastic things in your room, maybe you want to look at getting some more wooden and natural type materials for children to interact with. And the next one is resources to support play-based learning. So have you got a lot of worksheets with math sums on them? Obviously that's not play-based. So you would tick there not met. So if you are meeting it, think about the resources in your room. How is play-based learning promoted? And if you want more information to help you about what this means, once again, you can go back here, find your national quality standard and look in quality area 3, and you can see all these descriptors here, but there's also a button here called resources. And you can see here there's design, there's use, and there's a lot of information that you can use to help support you. So what are the consequences of limited play? So obviously that's going to be a video about, risky play. Then you've got sustainability, you've got information about sustainability, you've got babies and outdoor play, so that could help you with, a couple of these here on thinking about what you can write in here to show that you're meeting that standard. And then you've got practice that are met or exceed expectations of the NQS. So this is where you're going to list your service's strengths. So is one of your strengths that you're meeting all those regulatory requirements? Is some of your strengths that you have a very detailed sustainability project or service? Things like that would be considered strengths. Thinking about some of the things you've identified up here. So, for example, the section about being an inclusive environment, you might say indoor and outdoor spaces have been adapted for children with additional needs. So you've got those adjustable furnitures, or you've got visual schedules, and you've developed those in consultation with families or allied health professionals. You've had allied health people come in and talk to you about how the sandpit might need to have more access points for students or children that have got differing needs to be able to get in and out of the sandpit and participate as with everyone else. This section, if you notice anything that you think is exceeding, so it's not just meeting the national quality standards, it's above. So if you have got a really detailed sustainability project, or you have adapted your playground to ensure that children with special needs are able to access, you've got your worm farms and you've got your water saving routines, put them in there as your exceeding themes. Then you've got continuous improvement opportunities. So if you see somewhere where maybe things weren't met and you think it could be lifted, you put the standard or element. So you'd go back up here and let's say you haven't got enough resources. So you'd pick that one and you'd go copy and you'd put that there. Oops. And you'd put 3.1.2 or whatever standard or element and areas for improvement as you identified in that self-assessment. So for this part, for the continuous improvement, you need to identify a minimum of 2 areas of improvement. So even if everything up here is met, what could go further? What could be exceeding? So maybe you've got environmental responsibility. You do lots of things that are environmentally responsible, but you want to take it that step further. Maybe you do want to invite elders in or something like that. So you put your standard or element there, and then you put your areas improved or as identified through the self-assessment. So that's number 3 done, and then you're going to go down to number 5, which is on, and it's all colour-coded here, so we need to get away from green. Here you go, number 5 is orange. So you do exactly the same thing for this quality area as well. So you come in here, and this one here, you've got an S here. So that's for the law, and then you've got your regulations here. So looking at the law, and you've got the law here, it's an offence to use inappropriate discipline. So you need to know what inappropriate discipline is. So let's see what that tells us. So I go back to the NQF, and we need to look at the law and the regulations. So this one we're going to go to the law, and there's a PDF here. So we're going to go to this one. And we're looking for number 166. So here we are at number 166 of the law, where it says an offence to use inappropriate discipline. So we're unpacking that. It's saying the approved provider of an education and care service must ensure that no child being educated or cared for by the service is subject to any form of corporal punishment or any discipline that is unreasonable in the circumstances. So you can see the penalties applied here in the case of if you yourself have been found to do any of these things, and in any other case. And then it's got part 2 of this, nominated supervisor must ensure, same again. So this is for the approved provider, which is the owners of the service, and the nominated supervisor is in day-to-day charge of the service. So a staff member or volunteer must not subject to any child. So basically it's the same again. No corporal punishment and no discipline that is unreasonable in the circumstances. So it's pretty vague and broad. What do you consider unreasonable? So there's a way to unpack this if you wanted to dig a bit deeper. So if you wanted some clarification, I found this in the Department of Education, and it's about guiding children's behaviour and what the term discipline means. And it's got here unacceptable practices, which you'll see here is hitting or slapping, force feeding, yelling or belittling, humiliating a child, physically dragging a child. Other examples, or depriving a child of food. In other words, if you don't eat your vegetables, you can't have your dessert. That is inappropriate and unreasonable discipline. Other examples are negative labelling, criticising, discouraging, blaming, shaming, making fun of, using sarcastic or cruel humour, or excessive use of the language, no, stop that, don't, things like that. And then you've got more information here about your policies and the use of inappropriate discipline and how it links to laws and regulations here, and you can see those here. So there's lots of moving parts to this offence to use inappropriate discipline, but you can see why it's important. You can't just tick the box compliant and non-compliant until you've actually had a look at what this means. And then you would go through all of those. Oh, sorry, there's only 3, so that's a bit different from Quality Area 3 where there was a heap more. And you're looking at Regulation 155. So looking here, you can see regulations are here, and if I go down and find 155, you'll find that the regulations give a little bit more detail as compared to the law that's quite broad. So here you've got relationships with children and interactions with children. So you need to ensure that reasonable steps are taken, that the service provides education and care to children in a way that encourages children to express themselves and their opinions, and there's an and here, there's not an or, allows children to undertake experience to develop self-reliance and self-esteem, and we maintain their dignity and rights of child, and we give each child positive guidance and encouragement towards acceptable behaviour, and we have regard to family and cultural values and intellectual development and abilities of each child. So there's a few moving parts there as well. So if you want to look a bit deeper, like I said, you would go here and you'd go back to your National Quality Standard, and if you go down to Quality Area 5, once again you can see all the standard and elements that match up with this self-assessment plan. But if you hit this Resources tab, there are a heap of resources here to help you determine whether you're actually compliant or not compliant, or you're meeting or not meeting this standard, or if you're meeting it really well. In other words, you're exceeding. So these are broken down into relationships between educators and children. Then you've got relationships between children and children. So then you come down here to Quality Area 5 and you do the same as you did to Quality Area 3. You're looking at each one. So responsive and meaningful interactions build trusting relationships which engage and support each child to feel secure. Is that met or not met? And if it's not met, put some more evidence here as why. But you need to fill in each of these. So you need to have evidence of why that's met. You need to explain in each one of these boxes how you meet. And then once again, you're coming down here and you're looking at your service strengths, and you're looking at how practices are embedded in your service. So then once again, you need to pick 2 standards or elements for areas of improvement, and you need to identify how you would improve those areas there.